Okay, good afternoon, boys and girls. Welcome to today's lesson. I hope you guys can all see me. I hope you guys have been practicing your chess. And I hope you guys are ready for another lesson. Okay, just before we get into it, I just want to post, I'm going to put some details here on the Lee Chess chat room with the Zoom ID and the Zoom password. So let me just do this. So 9545228. Okay. We'll be busy here. 1568. Guys, remember this stuff is always posted by Mr. Kampa, and you guys should have this information. And the password, as always, will be, I know you guys know, chess. All right. Fantastic. Guys, like I said, I hope you've been braving the cold. It's not been too warm of late. Definitely been feeling a little bit myself. So I hope you guys are keeping warm, staying indoors, and of course, getting in some quality chess time. All right. So let's get into it. We've got a couple of exercises, and then we'll move on to our planned studies. All right. So first one, it is white to play in this position. We can see white's in a little bit of a pickle here, if I can call it that. We can see that there's a pin, a little bit of a situation that white has to deal with in this position. He's got a little bit of a tough spot. By all accounts, it looks like he is in grave danger of losing a queen for little to no compensation. So he's got his work cut out for him. He's got to find a way to solve this problem. You guys have got 30 seconds to a minute to give me some answers. All right, we've already got one answer coming in there. That's quick, that's fast, I like that. Let's get involved from the others. Guys, remember, I prefer the Lee Chess chat, but if you're struggling with that, as I know some people are for whatever reason, feel free to use the Zoom chat room. So whatever move you opt for, it has to address that problem. I mean, queen takes rook is just not going to do it. It looks like we're just losing a queen for the rook. We've got a couple more stuff flying in there. It's a nice try. We've had from there, we've got Dan and Mackenzie. Okay, thanks for that, Mackenzie. Just posting the study to everybody. That's good stuff. Rook h4, interesting try. I'm just trying to see if that's a problem. I mean, of course, if black takes your rook, then white takes the rook on f5, and I think white would be very happy with that solution because it's rook for rook, and that's a good trade. But I think rook h4, black just goes rook takes b5 with check, and I think that's the key factor there, the fact that it's check. Because it's check, you'll have to deal with the check. You're going to have to move, and then they'll take the rook. That's going to backfire, but a nice try. Thank you very much for the response. Get involved, guys. Remember, that's important. Like we always saying, you know, make sure that you participate in these lessons. It's not going to be useful to sit back. All right. Let's proceed with the answer. Keanu's given us rook f4, which is quite a nice move. I like it. Of course, the plan here, he's kind of like, okay, you've pinned me. I'm going to pin you. It's almost like a double pin here, really, because when I play rook f4, the rook can't take my queen. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then, of course, as in any of these situations, you've got to address what's going to happen if the rook takes the rook on f4. Like, that just looks like a free rook, and then you're like, wait a minute. There's a queen on h5. So black can't go rook takes f4 here. He's just unable to play that move. He's dropping the queen on h5. But I don't know what else is he going to do. If he doesn't do that, he's gonna drop the rook on f5, because then white's just going to go rook takes f5. So black's got a decision. You know, he's got a decision to make here. Does he drop the rook for free? Does he lose the free 5 points? Or does he say, okay, you know, I'm rather going to drop the queen and I'm going to take the rook? Probably this is the best option. But I think it's pretty lost. There's almost almost no circumstances in which you're going to see black surviving here. Rook h4, why? I'm not really sure what you're asking me. I think I already explained it. I'll go back to rook h4. Guys, if you do have questions, very happy to explain. Just try and be a little bit more clear in whatever you're asking me so that I can at least give you a proper answer. And I think questions, like I'm always saying, questions are good. So rook h4, the problem with rook h4 is rook takes b5 check. Then you move the king, then I take your rook. Yes, you will get this rook, but black is a clean queen up, and this is pretty much over. Accidental. All right, no worries. It happens. It happens to all of us. It's happened to me a few times. Okay, all good. That answers that. Rook f4, nice move. Well done. So like we said, that pretty much, it sort of flips things around. It goes from bad news for white to bad news for black. And it's amazing how these opportunities can sneak in. And that's what tactics are all about, really, is seizing opportunities that present themselves over the board. And you're sort of going on about with your plan, you know, you're looking at this, you're like, I'm attacking on the king side, things like that. He's attacking on the queen side. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a tactic might present itself. All right, he said rook f4. Why didn't the black just take the queen? Okay, there we go. Black couldn't take the queen because the rook was pinned. So that's why rook f4 is good. Nicely done, guys. Good participation. Loving it. Let's move on. Probably a little bit more difficult than the previous one. You're looking at a fairly even game here. It's a knight and a bishop and queen on both sides of the board. 5 pawns apiece, 5 pawns. In all honesty, the pawn structure is probably slightly worse for white because white's got these double pawns. It's almost like these 3 pawns are equal to the value of these 2 pawns because they're not going to be able to create a passed pawn here. Whilst this pawn, passed pawn, but also an isolated pawn. It's a bit of a weakness. Maybe white can put some pressure on that. I'll give you guys a clue. They've got to go for this king. It's white to play. Let's see what we can get out of you guys. A minute. You got a minute to win it. Some answers pouring in here. I like it, guys. Very nice. I'm going to hang back for a second. We've got queen g5 and queen h6. I'll give you guys another couple seconds, see if anything else rolls in. That's exactly where my head goes to as well. So I like what I'm hearing. You've got to try, and I already gave you the clue of the king, but you've got to see which pieces can sort of get in there. I definitely have a look at this move. Be like, okay, where is the knight going? Doesn't look too convincing. You can't go here either, which would maybe be a nice try because the bishop's got these squares covered. Doesn't feel like the knight's going to do a great deal there. And then we look at the queen. Queen c3, you sort of create a mini battery and try and use this diagonal and really hit. But the problem is then he trades the queens. And we know that without the queen, often the attack is a little bit diluted. It's a little bit weaker. You don't really have as much firepower without the queen. Very seldomly will you mate somebody in the middle game without a queen. Fun fact, it just doesn't happen because you just don't have enough firepower. So the queen is always at the head of the army, leading the attack. And without her there, it doesn't really happen. All right, so let's go straight into queen g5. Seems like the most popular choice. We've had queen g5 and queen h6 as potential options. So queen g5, as Keanu has just pointed out in the chat, it attacks the e7 knight and the g7 pawn. Always a good idea when you're able to generate a double attack, because you're attacking two things at the same time, and often this is very difficult for the opponent to deal with. You know, you can't solve both problems. In some cases you can, but it's often quite difficult to do so. And this is one of those sort of cases where you are able to solve the problem. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the knight to g6. I'm going to save the knight from danger, and I'm going to block the queen's attack to this g7 square. Very nice move. I'll perfectly admit that this is the move I thought of first when I created this position. And I was like, okay, you know, queen g5 looks good. Ooh, but knight g6 sort of solves that problem. And now the knight's not in the way, so if you were to attack this again, I could probably just march the queen down to one of these squares and help to defend this g7 pawn. So it looks like I'm sort of locking up here. Looks like black is going to survive. Let's investigate our other solution, and that is queen h6. A little bit more convincing, a little bit more conviction there, really basically saying I want that g7 square, and working the pin at the same time. We can see, of course, that the pawn unable to take the queen because of the pin. And now the issue that black has is it doesn't seem like it's possible for them to defend this g7 square. To me, knight f5 looks like the only plausible move that you might be able to defend the g7 square, but simply G just takes f5, that piece drops. And maybe that's the way this game is going to have to continue. I think that might be the best move for black. He's going to go knight f5. You're going to just take it. And now the knight's not here, so the queen can sneak back to one of these squares on the 7th rank and defend the g7 pawn. That looks like the only way. It's going to be a short-lived defense. Oh, check this out, guys. I think I just found a really cool move. F6 looks like a showstopper. That is fantastic. It's always nice when you get to pull those off. It looks like it might work. Of course, if G takes, then bishop takes F6, and that's going to lead to mate, because G takes bishop F6. They've got to go queen G7. After queen G7, you're taking on G7, which is going to be mate. The more interesting and probably pretty of the two is what happens if they take your queen on h6. Then I just play f7, and that looks like that's going to be mate. Wow, you don't see that too often. Very, very cool one. I'm happy about that. Nice to sort of work one of those in there. But of course, you needed to investigate that. I think once you'd won the piece already here, this was already winning for white. Cool one. Guys, this one's one of those double-sided stories. If it's white to play, what does he play? Quick. This is an easy one. Come on, guys. Oh, yes, one is in. Rook b8. We've got a rook b8 and a rook b8. Nicely done, guys. Good stuff. Rook b8, excuse me, delivers a mate, and that is that. So it is black to play in this position. Black to play and win. I'm not going to give you too much more clues than that. I will. All right. I'll highlight the king as the clue. But remember, obviously on the board, you don't get any clues. So the point is to try and solve these puzzles without clues. And I hope you guys have been doing your tactics that we've been posting for you guys on a weekly basis on that chess program. I promise you, if you've been doing those tactics, your analysis is improving, which means your calculations improving, which means you are slowly but surely becoming a force to be reckoned with on the chessboard, which is great news. So we've got a rook h2 and a rook h2. I'd love a little bit more. Oh no, we've got a rook h2 and a queen h2. Two slightly different moves. I'd love a little bit more analysis from you guys. Rook h2, fairly vague. Rook h2, we've got a never mind. Keanu, I'm really happy with the explanation. I feel like you've writing full sentences here. But what might make your life a little bit easier is just stick with standard chess notation, my boy. Just write in, like queen takes h2, rook takes h2, whatever the case. Stick to notation. That's going to be the easiest way to explain. It also simplify your life a little bit. So we got a rook takes b2 as well. All right, rook takes b2 to me looks like a fairly decent move. I mean, it's probably important if you take the fact that you're about to get mated into consideration. You're like, hey, I'm just going to get rid of that rook and make sure that I'm not getting mated. There's still some other weird, scary stuff going on. It looks like queen b7 followed by queen b8. Could be a little bit nasty, but probably black is okay there. But in all honesty, that's just a swapping or trading of the rooks. It doesn't feel like that's convincing enough for my liking. I'm definitely not convinced by that move. The alternative was rook h2. I believe that move was retracted, taken back. I think the rook just takes. And the problem is now this additional defender here. And even in taking on here, taking on h2 is not going to give you anything. So that was going to not work out too well. But Keanu had the right move here with queen h2. Good stuff. It's a queen sack. And as with all sacrifices, you need to be absolutely positive that you are making the right call. Remember, if I sack a queen, if this doesn't work out, I lose the game. So I really need to be absolutely sure that this is the right move. And the only way to do that is to really, really analyze it carefully and see, am I 100% sure there's no other move that white can play here? There is not. Bishop has to take. And now you see, I keep this rook locked out of the game by using this rook. Important point, if you go, this rook takes h2, it's not mate, because then this rook just sort of follows him and takes back. So it's only if this rook takes. And as you guys can see, if you are looking at my shared screen, that's one of the things I love about Lead Chess is it does the notation for you, for those of us who are not that big a fan of notating. Look, it's important because it teaches you an understanding and appreciation for the squares and how everything sort of coexists on the board. It's quite cool. But, here it is. So you need to specify just queen h2, then you say bishop takes h2, and then rook h, because actually both rooks can go to the h2 square. So you need to specify which rook it is that's actually going there, and it's the h rook that ends up taking the h2 pawn, and that is checkmate. Very cute little one at the end there. Nicely done for those of us who solved it correctly. Next one on our list. It is black to play and win. No clues for you here. What's the story here? It looks like black's a pawn up. This pawn just lurking. He looks like he's got an extra pawn. He also looks like he's got a bit of momentum here. White's king a little bit unhappy. Let's see what you guys can come up with. A minute to win it. We've had a rook d8, mainly not, maybe not. It does seem like the rook is already on d8, so it's probably not the move you were hoping for. We've got a rook a8, a nice try. I like the idea. Of course, rook a8, suddenly we're looking at this a2 pawn. All right, rook a8, that makes sense. Yeah, I suppose the a and d are a little close. But, yes, but we're waiting. What's the problem with rook a8, guys? What happens if we play rook a8? Let's put this conversation on pause. Let's say black follows our advice and he goes rook a8. He's like, yeah, it looks cool. The rook's on a semi-open file. I'm threatening mate on a2. Looks pretty juicy. Does rook a8 have any consequences? So I play rook a8. What is white playing? Keanu says they can defend. Yeah, they can defend, but there's actually something else that they can do that's a little bit more scary than simply defending. Dum, dum, dum. Yes, they can defend, and wow, that move is happening. Yes, thank you, Keanu. Keanu has spotted it. We've got another one coming in here. Oh, yes. Dan has got Queen G7 as well. Very nice, guys. Ooh, you know, that's happening as well. So I think personally, if I would say identifying opponent threats is always the most important thing. You need to be aware. It's probably more important than your own threats, because you want to make sure that you're not falling for any sort of threats or tricks. You're dropping, you know, pieces or mate in this case, and then just throwing the game immediately. So if black can't come up with something concrete, let's say something good where he's actually going to checkmate white, then he needs to deal with this problem. And he might do that by going G6 or F6 is often a common way to shut down this diagonal, which then will remove some of the pressure here. But this mate threat needs to be dealt with if I'm not playing a check. It's actually mate in 2 for black, guys. Let's see if we can find it. I'll give you guys a few more seconds. Mate in 2. Look around. Scour the board. Maybe there's something here. Come on, that brain is still young. These brains can't hurt. The brains have got to work. You've got young, healthy, fresh brains. So 95, interesting try. It does feel like I've got 2 pieces looking at that square. And I would argue that I might just be able to pick that knight off and continue my threat. All right, I want to move on because we are on a time limit. So let's see. Queen A2. Zach comes up with the gold. Fantastic. I was just about to call it, Zach. Thank you so much for that. Queen A2 is the move. Again, wow, it's quite a bold move, no doubt. We're just giving up the queen for a pawn. And I hope that you've analyzed the next move, because without it, we're just dropping a queen for apparently nothing. It is the correct move, and it is a queen sack. There we go. Keanu is ready to help you out in case. And there we go. Then now the moves pour in. Well spotted, guys. Nice participation as well. So queen A2, king A2, and then boom, rook A8. So often you guys will come up with the right sort of ideas. Your brains you'll sort of see the right, let's say, coordination of pieces. You'll be like, okay, I go here, and this is where I want to be headed. But you often maybe might have the wrong move order. So then you got to just go back and try the different move orders and see if maybe that's going to help your idea to actually work out. So queen A2, king A2, rook A8. And that is a mate. Pretty cool one. Very, very nifty little mate. And obviously sacking a queen and delivering mate in a game is quite a beautiful feeling. It's not something that you get to do a lot of. But so it's definitely something special. Well solved, guys. Let's move on. All right, so quite an interesting topic that I have lined up for today, and that is the fried liver being explored in a little bit more detail. I think for a lot of us in this class, the fried liver is kind of like, I think some people play it against you, and then you sometimes know what to do, and you sometimes don't know what to do. I definitely think it's a good topic. I might actually do another one on it going forward. As a good way for black to defend it, because it's one thing to know it as white, it's also very important to know how to defend against it in these positions as well. So let's get right into it. That's e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. A position I think at this stage you guys are all pretty familiar with. Bishop c4. So this looks like the start of an Italian game. I think I touched on a bit of Italian with 4c3 last week. And the idea is to then get in d4. It's a nice attacking opportunity. So in this position, black plays knight f6. And this gives rise to the potential to go knight g5 and hit the f7 pawn, which does cause the opponent some, let's call it inconvenience or difficulties, if you don't know what you're doing. I think before I go on into the nitty-gritty and the details there, I think it's worth mentioning that black can just play bishop c5 here and keep the queen diagonal open so that the knight can't pop to this g5 square. And then you don't really have to deal with it in too much. You don't have to deal with the fried liver at all, actually. If they go d3, you just go knight f6, knight g5, and just castles. And the rook just defends the f7 pawn. So the point is, if they can castle, then the knight g5 idea falls flat, because they can just castle and defend f7 in a productive way. Instead, if black opts for knight f6, this gives rise to the fried liver. It's a very strange name. It's a weird name. But it's very good and useful for your chess education. So the only way to prevent knight takes f7 with any sort of, let's call it usefulness, is to go d5. Because otherwise knight f7 just cripples black's position and things just get quite nasty. For example, like rook g8 is hopeless. Just go bishop f7 and bishop g8. Queen e7, I won't say is equally as bad, but it's still bad. I just take f7. You have to move the rook. I just come back. You have to move the rook back. So I've picked up this pawn. Now I can go bishop check if I want. I can probably just castle if I want. It's a very comfortable position that white enjoys. So the only real move that they can play is d5. And d5, of course, now blocks the diagonal and blocks the pressure on f7. So e takes d is a natural move, of course, that white's going to play. And now knight takes d5. And that gives rise to your standard fried liver position. All right, so knight takes d5, actually a mistake here, but this is what we, this is kind of what we're hoping for as white. So there's two good moves here, and one of them is d4. You can play d4 and then just castle and look for rook e1, which is pretty cool. But I want to talk to you today about knight f7, very popular, very common way of approaching this position. So it looks like I'm sacking a piece here, and you're like, what? Did he just do that? Yes, he just did that. He must have a trick up his sleeve. And spoiler alert, queen f3 is on its way. And that's going to be hitting the king and the knights at the same time. And this is going to make life quite uncomfortable for black. Almost unbearably so. We're going to check it out now. So that's king f7, queen f3, as promised. So normally you might think, okay, can't I just move the knight and block? So there's a pin here as well. So that knight's not going anywhere. You will not believe, I have seen this next move. I'm going to show you king g8. It's a horrible move. It's the worst move on the board, just about. I've seen it actually at quite a high level of chess. I won't go into any details. But I've seen it sort of at national level. Some people have maybe, obviously it's a bad mistake, and then just tossed the game like this. Bishop d5 leads to a mate here. Bishop e6 and bishop e6. Ouchies. So definitely not the way you want to go down. Absolutely not. So that's just a horrible one. Don't go king g8, whatever you do. King e8, white just takes the knight. And what's happened is he's won a pawn, and he's still looking at some threats here. He's looking at also bishop c6 potentially too. Bishop c6, b c6, and then queen c6, taking the king and attacking the rook. So some sneaky stuff lurking in this position. So I think you have to go king e6. It's the only way. In for a penny, in for a pound. Black's going to hold on to this knight with all of his life. And we'll see how that works out for him. So we bring in another knight, another piece. Guys, it's always a good idea whenever you're attacking, bring more pieces into the attack. That's a great, great one to remember, a good rule to follow. Whenever your attack is sort of running out of steam, yes, it's always a good idea to see, can I bring more forces in? Can I bring more pieces into the attack? More fuel to the flame, more fuel to the fire. This is what we want. So now this is under threat. Of course, if they just give me the piece back, I'm going to be very happy. I've ruined the king. I've won a pawn. White obviously will not be complaining about that. Probably knight ce7 or knight e7, I guess, because this knight can't move. To defend, ooh, that's a bit of a skew one. To defend the knight on d5 seems like a good way to go. So we haven't won the piece yet, and it's not game over just yet. But what we always want to do in these cases, castle the king and get the rook onto the e-file as soon as possible. When I do that, I'm going to be a happy man. I'm going to see that rook looking right at the king. There's going to be a lot of problems that black will have to deal with. So I would have probably castled here had I not known what the best move for white is, and that is actually d4. So you're throwing black a little bit of lure. Of course, I probably would have castled and then played d4 with the ideas of rook e1 coming next. That's sort of what I'm hoping for. And then, of course, I've got nice attack on the king. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask you guys, what happens if black now takes this pawn? This is a mistake, black taking the pawn. White has a very potent response. Let's see what you guys have got. Keanu's already fired off a move. I'd prefer a little bit longer thought process there, guys. You can never really be that certain of a move if you're going to, like, sort of, I don't know, play it in 10 seconds or less. You're going to require a little bit more analysis. Let's give you guys another 30 seconds or 20 seconds or so. Of course, it is something to do with the attack, and it's something to do with that king. Keanu's move does look good, though. We've got some more involvement. What's the story here? Bishop d5. Okay, I don't mind bishop d5. I kind of like it. The one thing I will say is when you have a pin, which is what we have here, the bishop is pinning the knight to the king. Most of the time, I won't want to trade this piece for that piece because currently my bishop is making this knight useless. He can't do anything, okay? So I generally won't want to trade here. The correct move is queen e4, well done. That's well spotted. It's check, and I'm putting the pressure here. Now, the problem that black has now is that there's no way that you can move the king and still defend the knight at the same time. So big issue that black has. And probably the best move. Ooh, it's a tough one. I'm thinking I should just run back, try to run for my life. Because I think this is going to be worse. Any of these cases, I'm just going to go knight takes d5. So I won the piece back is what's going to happen. After knight takes, queen takes. All right, let's go down this path. Give me the winning sequence for white, please, guys. White has a crusher here. Keanu's on the ball. Somebody else? I want the next move after bishop g5. So bishop g5, the king has to go to e8. What's the winning move? Bishop g5, king e8. What's the winning move? Keanu's given us something. Yes, that move does work from Keanu. There is another move, though. There is another move. So bishop g5, just at first glance, ouch, you realize that's just unpleasant. It's check. and it looks like that queen is leaving the building. King e8 is forced. Queen e6. See, that's what happens if you make moves quickly without analyzing detail. Okay, looks like we're running out of time here. So queen e5, e5, sorry, I'm reading Keanu's thing, is probably not the best. They can block with the bishop. Queen d8 is mate. That's nicely done. And I actually like queen f7, just sort of ignoring that queen and just delivering mate. Mate is mate, and that's nicely done. Guys, we're not going to have time for our Queen's Gambit introduction. We'll have to do that next time. Looking forward to it. Until then, guys, keep practicing. Keep up the chess work. Please do that program. And also with the last half an hour, I'll be watching you guys. Make sure that you play 2 chess games, please. Let's stick to the rapid and the classical. Maybe the 15-minute time control is the recommendation.